There are certain ideas that always seem to terrify the powerful, not because they are dangerous, but because they are honest, not because they threaten freedom, but because they expose how little freedom we actually have. Ideas like that a society should invest in its people, that workers deserve dignity and a fair share of the wealth they create, that monopolies should be broken up because concentrated power is the enemy of liberty, that education, health, shelter, and opportunity are not luxuries, but the foundation of a functioning republic, that markets work best when the playing field is level and the rules are fair, that the purpose of an economy is the flourishing of human beings and not the hoarding of capital by a few, that government should serve the public interest instead of corporate donors, that prosperity is meaningful only when it is shared. These ideas are not radical. They are not foreign. They are not imported from some Marxist dystopia designed to scare cable news hosts into cold sweats. These ideas are capitalism, as originally described by Adam Smith, the high priest of the so-called free market, whose gospel is the wealth of nations. They are also the core ideals of democratic socialism. The heresy here is not in the policy. The heresy is in the word. That is why the political class is losing its mind over the rise of democratic socialists in America. That is why the victory of Zoran Mamdani in New York sent a tremor through the donor class and set off alarm bells in the party establishment. They are not afraid of the platform. They are afraid that the public is waking up to the old con, the one where we have been told that capitalism is sacred, perfect, untouchable, and that any challenge to the status quo is an attack on America itself. So let's strip away the theatrics and tell the truth. Because Adam Smith believed in a moral economy. He believed in the wealth of a nation that began with workers and that the fruits of their labor must be shared fairly. He believed monopolies were corrupt. He believed the state had an obligation to provide public goods, enforce justice, educate the people, and invest where private markets never would. He believed inequality was dangerous. He believed greed was not a virtue, but a flaw requiring oversight. This is the part of Smith that Wall Street never puts in the brochure. And when you take those ideals and line them next to the core tenets of democratic socialism, the overlap is undeniable. Both believe in markets that serve people rather than the other way around. Both believe in the necessity of public investment and public goods. Both believe that workers, not capital, are the source of national prosperity. Both believe that concentrated corporate power is a threat to freedom. Both believe the purpose of an economy is the well-being of the many, not the comfort of the few. The differences between Smith and modern democratic socialists exist, but they are far smaller than the noise machine wants you to believe. Smith placed more faith in competitive markets. Democratic socialists place more weight on public safeguards. But both see the same dangers. Both demand fair rules. Both insist on a society that invests in itself. Both reject the wild jungle of modern predatory capitalism, where corporations write the laws and the people are told to be grateful for whatever scraps fall their way. And that brings us back to the fear. The Republican Party and more than a few institutional Democrats spin panic around Mamdani's win because he represents something more dangerous than leftism. He represents honesty. He represents a rejection of the donor class that controls the political class. He represents the idea that policy should serve working people instead of lobbyists. He represents the terrifying possibility that Americans might learn that the economy they were promised is not the one they got, and that there is an alternative that is both moral and effective. The fear is not about socialism. The fear is about accountability. The fear is about the public discovering that what we call capitalism in America is not Adam Smith's capitalism at all. It is a bastard child born of monopoly, extraction, deregulated greed, and political capture. It is mercantilism in modern form, the very system Smith wrote his masterpiece to destroy. And when Mamdani wins and the democratic socialists rise, when ordinary people begin to question why the chasm between productivity and wages has grown into a canyon, the guardians of this broken model panic. Because once you take away the myth, once you point out that democratic socialist policies resemble Smith's vision far more than our corporate-dominated system does, that spell is broken. And suddenly, the question becomes unavoidable. If the original architects of capitalism believed in fairness, public investment, anti-monopoly protections, workers' rights, moral duty, and shared prosperity, then why do we call those same principles radical today? And the truth is simple. People are not afraid of democratic socialism. They are afraid of the word. They are afraid of the label they have been trained to fear. They are afraid that if the public understands what the policy actually is, they will never again settle for the economic scraps that pass as reform. And that fear is justified, because once you learn the truth of what Smith actually wrote, once you see how closely the future that democratic socialists are proposing mirrors the values he laid down 2.5 centuries ago, you cannot unsee it. And the next question becomes the one the political establishment fears most. If this is what Adam Smith believed, if this is what democratic socialism believes, then what exactly is the system we have now? So we call it by its real name. We call it what it is. Call it what Smith himself warned against. Because it's not capitalism. It's not freedom. This is not the invisible hand of the moral marketplace or the promise of shared prosperity. This is mercantilism, a system where wealth pools at the top, where corporations dictate the terms of democracy, where economic power buys political obedience, where policy is written by those who profit from it, where the state exists to protect insiders and punish outsiders. It's the same old empire of monopolies and ministers, the same corrupt architecture of privilege Smith tried to burn down. It's the same economic rot dressed in the modern language of markets and growth and stock valuation. And the moment people understand that, the moment you realize the heresy is not democratic socialism, but the false gospel of the system we live under, the moment you see that the false prophets of capitalism have been preaching mercantilism while calling it freedom, that's the moment the spell breaks. That is the moment the people wake up. That is the moment everything begins to change. So, you can spend your life being afraid of a word. You can hand your faith to a political class addicted to power, a class that feeds on your fear the way bankers feed on interest, a class that survives because you never look behind the curtain. You can believe in a market that works beautifully for them and barely at all for you. Or you can read a book or two and see with your own eyes that the monster you were warned about is nothing more than a coat rack with strategic lighting, dressed up to keep you obedient. The fear was never yours. It was sold to you. And the moment you stop buying it is the moment you become impossible to rule. Defiance till death.